Hi, everyone. I'm Braden Russell, Chief Technology Officer at Bugcrowd, and I'm happy to participate in TechNado's Humans in Cyber interviews. When I look back at how I ended up in crowdsourced cybersecurity, my path wasn't always a straight line, but it has always had a through line to get here. I started my cybersecurity career at a company called Foundstone, doing vulnerability management and doing it through the mind of a hacker. And that was a very formative time for me. I learned the craft from the ground up. I learned how attackers think, learned how to find flaws that others miss, and how to communicate technical risk in a way that actually drives action. And that mindset stuck with me. And what became really clear and what became a very fundamental truth early on about defense is no matter how talented your internal team is, you're always going to have blind spots. Hackers continue to find success. You're looking at your code with the same set of eyes day after day, but attackers don't have that limitation. So when the crowdsourced model started to take shape, it made a lot of sense to me. That idea that you could harness thousands of curious, creative minds and then point them at your attack surface at scale, that was evolutionary. It was revolutionary. It took the spirit of what we were doing at Foundstone and it made it continuous, it made it global. So when I got the opportunity to join Bugcrowd, what struck me the most about the technology and about the company was the human element behind the platform. These aren't just vulnerability submissions in a queue. These are real researchers building real expertise and real relationships. That was the part that excited me the most as CTO at Bugcrowd, is we're building the technology that makes those human connections more powerful, makes the human expertise and the human ingenuity more impactful. And so the question is, that human element really takes shape in the Bugcrowd platform. How should companies respond when a vulnerability first gets reported? Think about that human element. The first response sets the tone for everything that follows. What works best when a company responds is how they treat those external researchers. If they treat those external researchers as a true extension of their internal security team, that works really, really well. Hackers develop a deep specialization. They can learn the nuances of an application, and then they can bring insight into complex attack chains that maybe internal teams don't have the bandwidth to chase down. So when a submission comes in, communication always comes first. Acknowledge it quickly, even if it ends up being a duplicate or if it ends up being invalid. Sending a message thanking the hacker for their time goes a long way. That small gesture goes a remarkably long way because hackers talk and they talk to each other, and the researchers who feel respected are the ones who come back. They're the ones who dig deeper. They're the ones who ultimately find the really high impact bugs that you really, really care about. So then what are those really high impact bugs that the researchers are finding in the Bugcrowd platform these days? What are the ones that maybe the internal teams are missing that the external research teams are finding? If I had to pick one category, the one that we're starting to see trend upward, it's broken access control. We're seeing a lot of these across the entire Bugcrowd platform. Think about it, modern apps are getting a lot more complex, more features, more integrations, more microservices, a lot more of the attack surface outside of the control of the development team that's working on the application. Access controls are getting harder to manage at that scale. And then what makes it worse is that broken access control issues tend to be kind of trivial to exploit, and they carry massive impact. When you can exploit broken access control, a lot of times you can get access to customer data, you can get privilege escalation, real business risk represented by these vulnerabilities. Part of it comes from just the pace of development. Developers are under enormous pressure to ship features quickly. Proper access control takes a long time. It takes a lot of due diligence. So sometimes security takes a backseat. A lot of times it's unintentional, it just happens. Then you layer AI on top of that, and AI just ratchets up the speed and complexity of everything. I genuinely expect that this type of vulnerability and this vulnerability category is going to continue to surge, and AI will cause it to surge even more. And then external researchers are catching these vulnerabilities because they don't have the same mental model as the internal developers who built the system. They also don't have the same limitations. They can sometimes poke at particular types or classes of vulnerabilities across massive swaths of applications. They're looking directly at an API, looking for those exact gaps. That outside perspective is invaluable. Of course, then finding the vulnerability is only half the battle. What then slows down fixing it once it's reported? Once a vulnerability comes in the platform, what is slowing down response? Typically, it's the lack of context. We're getting a massive amount of noise these days, and trying to reduce that down to signal is very difficult. Bug bounty submissions are one of those things, but you get scanning alerts, intelligence feeds, you have pen test results. The LLMs and the AI models that are coming out now are just dumping thousands and thousands of vulnerabilities. Which ones are the ones that matter? That's the context that is really important that security teams need to get. And what slows down fixing is not having access to that content. When the team's sifting through all of that with no context, it becomes incredibly difficult to understand what's actually exploitable in their environment. Without that context, everything looks equally urgent, which means nothing's urgent and nothing really gets fixed. So what security teams need is visibility across their entire attack surface, insight into the novel vulnerabilities, the vulnerabilities that actually would work in their attack surface as it exists, as it's running right now in production, and that's what they can find out from the Bugcrowd platform. But that challenge, of course, gets bigger when you factor in the rise of automated or low-quality vulnerability reports. What the industry is now experiencing is this increase in what we've called AI slop in bug bounty submissions. So as those submission volumes have scaled, our focus hasn't changed at all. Every submission that comes in has to be attributable to a responsible individual, has to stand up to scrutiny. That principle has become much more important, not less important. It's on us as an offensive testing platform to implement the controls that make that principle real. We can use AI to fight AI in some cases, but ultimately we want the AI submissions that find true risk and find true vulnerabilities. But what this surge has really emphasized is the importance of high-quality triage teams, of having high-quality experts that understand the customer's environment and have those relationships established so that the research teams and the triage teams understand the customer's environment, so that those teams then start to see the signal coming through all that noise and can maintain the trust across all of those relationships. So where does a company start? If a company is just starting out and they want to get started and they want to know, if I'm going to get hacked, the best way to preempt this hack is have the hackers tell me, where would you hack me? And I'll go fix it before a malicious hacker comes. If a company's just starting out with vulnerability disclosure or bug bounty, the one thing that they need to know from day one is that it isn't a one-size-fits-all checklist. You don't just check a box and say, we've got a bug bounty, now we're done. There's a roadmap that adapts to your context, to your goals, and to your readiness. The most effective programs are the ones that are honest about where they are, intentional about what comes next. You don't really just say, are we doing enough? You say, are we doing what we can for our stage, and can we be doing more? In the early days, your focus is on visibility. Can you inventory your assets? Are you patching your known vulnerabilities? Have you established incident response? Do you know what is in your attack surface? Do you not know what's in your attack surface? As your program matures, you shift from reacting to then preempting. using threat intelligence to prioritize based on active threats, using a VDP or a bug bounty to get the external perspective, and moving to the high maturity organization where you can do that in a continuous fashion, where every change in your application using external attack surface monitoring or plugging directly into your CI/CD pipeline, and every time a new change is published for your application can then be assessed in real time. But at every stage, the right question isn't, are we secure? Because it's a never-ending struggle. It's, can we prove we're secure against the threats that actually matter? Of all of the vulnerabilities that we know exist, which ones actually represent true risk to us as an organization? And I guess to sum it all up, though, if I could leave the cybersecurity community with one final thought, it would be this. It's that technology is going to keep changing. The threats will keep evolving. AI is just the next change in technology. It's just the next evolution, the next revolution in technology. But the human element of this work is what really matters. It's what really makes it sustainable. Invest in the people, invest in the relationships, and the rest of what matters really tends to follow. Again, thanks to TechNative for the opportunity to be part of Humans in Cyber.